apologize for not having a video up last week. I wasn't having the best of weeks, so I decided to just take a break from everything and relax. And I'm back in action. The next little bit is going to be a little weird because I'm looking at, I'm about a week away from going to visit my parents for the holidays. And while I'm there, I will not be posting videos on the schedule that I should be. So what my plan is I've basically got this week in between where I'm helping proctor some exams at my university and not much else. So my plan is to finish up all the videos for Chamber of Secrets, and I'll post them throughout this coming week. So you get a nice little grouping before the holidays. And then after that point, I will be on a very brief hiatus, I think only about 2 Sundays at most. And then once we get into the new year, I will start right away on Prisoner of Azkaban, which is actually one of my favorites. So I'm looking forward to doing this. Okay, so the chapter I'm looking at today is Aragog, and this chapter has definitely, for me, been affected by my BA. And the reason why I say that is because during my BA, after I had reread it the first year, so this really started coming into effect my second year, and it's continued all the way through, so it's really getting applied in this read-through. I read, this is a book called Monster Theory Reading Culture, and it's edited by Jeffrey Jerome Cohen. And this is a fabulous book. Very useful for literary theory and cultural studies. And it will never leave you. Like, once you've read some of the stuff in this book, it will stick with you. Even if you haven't actually read, like, the full book, or even the full essay I'm going to be talking about, if you have somebody that knows this theory and even vaguely teaches you, it will stick with you. I've got a prof that I'm working with this year. I'm her TA. And she taught me this theory, and like, she teaches it to all her classes, because you will never look at literary characters, particularly the monsters that we're seeing, the same after you've worked with this. And most specifically, the first essay in here is Monster Culture 7 Theses by Jeffrey Jerome Cohen. And this is the one she teaches, like, all her classes. Because what this does is it gives you 7 theses, oh god, theses, to actually help you study and look at monsters. Because what you find out is it's really hard to define a monster, but instead we can look at a monster, or who we want to see whether or not they're a monster, because what this is going to teach you is everybody's a monster in some way. And it gives you 7 theses to consider, and they are utterly beautiful theses. And for this chapter specifically, I'm going to be talking about 2 of them. I really think I'm going to do a video of just on this essay and on these theses, because, man, okay. So the 2 I'm going to be talking about is number 1, which is the monster's body is a cultural body, and number 3, which is the monster is the harbinger of category crisis. Oh god. Because what we have here is a really interesting chapter about a really gigantic spider. And we actually find out there's no connection between this spider and all the events going on. As much as we were thinking, oh, we might finally figure out what this monster is. No. No. We are looking in the wrong direction. But it's actually very interesting then that we are given this monstrous Aragog to consider. Like, what is he doing in this moment? And the truth is, when we look at Aragog with these theses in mind, what we find out is that while he's not super important for this story, he's actually really important for this world building that we're considering in this moment. Because, like, we have a couple things that come into effect. We find out that a lot of what we're afraid of, and what these characters are afraid of, are things that they cannot define and make sense of. Let's consider Aragog. We understand spiders well enough. A lot of people don't like them, but they're everywhere. What we cannot compute is a gigantic... Give me a second. I'm also referring to fantastic beasts and where to find them as we go through. 8-eyed, 8-legged. Its leg span may reach up to 15 feet. See, that bit doesn't make sense to us. Like, we can compute spiders, but we can't compute spiders so gigantic that their leg span is 15 feet. That says nothing about the rest of their body. Like, this is a massive monster these kids are facing down. And so, their understanding in this moment starts to break down. It can speak human speech. That's definitely not something we've attributed to something so totally and completely other at this point in time. Because let's figure out what we know in the series so far that can speak human speech. We've got humans, of course. And then we've got ghosts who used to be humans. At least, as close as we could tell, most of the ghosts we're running into seem to be human ghosts. And then we have goblins, we have house elves, and we have centaurs, who all seem to have that humanoid aspect that helps us bridge that gap of, oh my god, it speaks. Because we've got arms, we've got legs, we've got faces with human-esque features, but they look humanoid enough that we're just like, it's not completely surprising that you're speaking to me. It might be a little startling, but okay. And then you have a gigantic spider speak to you and you're just like, that's not normal. That's not normal at all. So this is actually the category crisis we are seeing within the being itself. But what the thesis points out is that it's not saying a monster is a category crisis. What the thesis is saying is the monster is the harbinger of category crisis. It is actually the sign, like, the sign is like, hi, something's breaking down. It's not always the monster. The monster itself is always going to have this category crisis. It cannot be defined. But it is also pointing to something in the society, in the story, something going on in this moment that is breaking apart. So we have to ask ourselves, what is Aragog's existence here breaking down for us? Well, one of them, I think, is this idea that Hogwarts is safe and the Forbidden Forest is dangerous. We still have the dangerous aspects of the Forbidden Forest. Like, we know that's not having a category crisis right now. Hogwarts is. Because this place is supposed to be safe, but we've lost sort of one of our best protections in Albus Dumbledore. We've lost somebody that can traverse between Hogwarts and the Forbidden Forest and possibly get information in Hagrid. Because we learned that a lot of the citizens of the Forbidden Forest like Hagrid. Aragog is like friends with this dude. He frets over him. It's pretty awesome to watch. And we've got this beast in the school. It is not in the Forbidden Forest. It is in the school. So the school itself is having a category crisis that we should be concerned about. There's a strong chance also, if we look really closely, Harry's running into this category crisis. And Ron too in this moment, because they're 12. They should be kids, but they're suddenly the only ones who are being proactive in any of this. Like, the teachers are, like, taking students between classes, except Gilderoy, who's just like, everything is solved! They wouldn't have arrested Hagrid if he wasn't, yeah. Like, Harry and Ron here are being proactive. They've been given advice from two people. They've figured out one of the... So they're figuring this out. A lot of the other students are also seeing category crisis in this moment. Ernie, during the herbology lesson, apologizes to Harry. Like, Ernie himself is having a category crisis because he's going, I thought I had this figured out, I don't have this figured out, and everything is going wrong. So, because we've got Aragog here, he is the sign that says something in the rest of everything is going wrong. Especially when this gigantic spider is afraid of whatever is in the school. Like, if that is not a category crisis of things aren't as they should be, I don't know what is. So that's the third thesis. The first one is always interesting to explain. And this is, a monster's body is a cultural body. What this basically means is a monster is created by a specific culture. If you look at different cultures around the world, they are going to have different monsters. They might have similar aspects that are generally feared by humanity, such as the unknown, the dark, mortality. Most of these, a lot of humanity is afraid of, so their monsters are going to reflect that. But a monster will actually change when it's taken from one culture to another culture. The North American version of Godzilla is different from the original Japanese version, because each culture is different, so they form their monsters differently. Because monsters are always going to be the thing that represents what the culture most fears and why. And that's going to be different for each group. And what is actually really interesting in this moment is we have layers and layers of this creation. We have, of course, the really far out meta one, which is J.K. Rowling wrote a book. So she creates Aragog from the fears of her Western culture. And then it only goes deeper from there. Again, if we turn back to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Under Acromantula, we actually have it noted, this beast is believed to be wizard bred, possibly intended to guard wizard dwellings or treasure, as it is often the case with magical created monsters. With the footnote, beasts capable of human speech are rarely self-taught, an exception is the Jarvie. The ban on experimental breeding did not come into effect until the century long after the first recorded sightings of an acromantula in 1794. And then we continue. Despite its near-human intelligence, the acromantula is untrainable and highly dangerous to wizard and muggle alike. So we actually have, like, within the canon, the fact that, quite literally, the wizarding culture created their monster, the acromantula. And then, of course, there is on an individual basis. And this is sort of the most interesting bit in regards to what we can see in this chapter. Because for Harry and Ron, Aragog is definitely a monster. Particularly for Ron, who literally, once the spiders show up, doesn't do anything until they have a chance to escape, in which he grabs Fang, throws him into a car, and then he vomits. Like, Ron is frozen. Like, he can't do anything. He's utterly terrified of normal-sized spiders. Never mind one with a 15-foot leg span. Harry, of course, once he's figured out that these spiders can speak, is trying to communicate. Like, Aragog's like, is it Hagrid? And they're like, no. And he's like, kill him. And Harry's just like, Hagrid is our friend, Hagrid sent us. But he's still terrified. Like, he knows full well that he can't stand up because his legs aren't gonna hold him. He doesn't have himself so fully together that he can just be like, hey dude. Like, Hagrid could walk into this place and be like, Aragog, little buddy, how's the wife doing? Like, Hagrid got Aragog his wife. What you're seeing in this moment is the cultural body creating a monster in comparison to another cultural body that's not. Because Harry and Ron are seeing Aragog, and most of the rest of the society would see Aragog as a monster, but Hagrid doesn't. So you then have to ask, why then is Hagrid not considering Aragog a monster? Why didn't he consider the dragon a monster? And we're gonna see this continue all the way through. Hagrid has got a very interesting perspective on what is considered monstrous. And part of that we need to remember is that Hagrid could be, in fact, defined as a monster himself. Because he's not completely human. He is half giant. He is, again, refusing that category definition. He is in himself a category crisis that signs other category crises. Like, Draco points this out, and while he does it, like, really snottily, it is something we have to remember. We cannot look at Hagrid as a pure human. He is not. For example, he has some of the giant qualities. He's big. He's not as big as a giant, but he's big. He has some resistance to spell damage, as we're going to see in the future. He has these aspects to him that we have to then consider. So if a lot of his own society is actually pushing him away and saying, no, you are other, you are separate, you are a monster, then how much more is Hagrid going to be willing to look at the other beings rejected from society as monstrous and recognize them as kin rather than other? So he doesn't have the same fear of all these monstrous beings because he himself is very notably different. Another way to put it is look at how the Dursleys have pushed Harry away, because for them, Harry is monstrous. He is this part of this other thing, this wizarding community. So then Harry goes into the wizarding community and finds his family there. So Hagrid's doing the same thing, just maybe with things that are a little more dangerous. Yet again, we're seeing they're not actually that dangerous to Hagrid. It's our society that's monstrous towards Hagrid. It's our society that comes in with no evidence whatsoever and persecutes Hagrid. So what Cohen's 7 Theses have taught me is that the monster will always change. And most notably, the second thesis is the monster always escapes. We're going to see later on that Aragog passes away. But we're also going to see that he has a lot of children that keep coming back. But the other escape we need to remember is the idea that if you hunt monsters for too long, you are liable to become a monster yourself. And I think Aragog is the symbol to us that this might start happening with some of these characters. So it might start happening with Hagrid, it might start happening with Ron, it might start happening with Harry, and it might start happening with Voldemort. So I think we need to keep a close eye on our monsters here, and an even closer eye on the characters we don't think are monstrous. Because I think we might be proven incorrect on that one. Okay, so with a week full of videos coming up, I'm gonna get started and keep reading, and I hope you guys do too. I will see you in the coming week. Bye!